Sal Lamberti, the alleged American contact man for Sicilian heroin importers who is now out on $3.5 million bail, spent his day trying to avoid returning to jail, extradition to Italy, and reporters. Lamberti was one of a dozen mobsters called before a U.S. magistrate this morning to be arraigned on extradition orders from the Italian government. All of those arraigned today, including Lamberti's alleged ringleader, Salvatore Catalano, were named as members of the Italian mafia in allegations from this man, Tommaso Buscetta. Buscetta was formerly in control of the heroin network before his arrest and extradition to Italy. For months, he has been cooperating with authorities in a startling break from the mafia's code of silence. In Italy this weekend, police rounded up scores of suspects based on Buscetta's testimony. At today's hearing, bail was continued for the defendants. Each of them is already facing American charges for alleged heroin importation. Their bails range from $700,000 to figures as high as $3.5 million for men like Sal Lamberti.
My client has maintained his innocence here. He maintains his innocence with regard to the extradition situation. And I think that he certainly is innocent, and we'll hope to vindicate that.
We asked another lawyer how, if the defendants were not in the heroin business as the government charges, they were able to raise up to $3.5 million bail. How are these clients able to raise $3.5 million bail?
It's a very good question. I wish you had been at the Nebbia hearing. They had 10, 15 friends, relatives, countrymen come forward and pledge homes, one-family homes, two-family homes, everything they worked for to make the bail.
So those allegedly involved with this international multi-billion-dollar heroin ring are still out on the street, and Tommaso Buscetta is still said to be cooperating with authorities in Italy, giving the information that brought these men to this courthouse today. Their next date in court, when the extradition proceedings will go forward, will be November 16th. John Miller, Channel 5 News.
Last night, Pablo Guzman reported on a series of raids that cracked a major heroin ring in our city. The ring operated out of 4 pizza parlors in Queens. Today, the Joint Drug Enforcement Task Force displayed the booty from the raids. And Pablo reports on what they found.
U.S. Attorney Rudolph Giuliani and the New York Drug Enforcement Task Force today displayed the loot from arrests of 11 principals in a major heroin operation with alleged ties to the Sicilian faction of the Bonanno crime family.
During the arrests, in excess of $1.6 million in cash has been seized, over 8 pounds of heroin, 2 pounds of cocaine, 26 guns, and a very expensive hoard of jewelry.
The alleged leader of the ring, Anthony Aiello, was not home at the time of the raids and is still at large, along with another associate. He owned this cafe in Middle Village, Queens, which is reported to have been a meeting place for crime figures. Aiello also owned several pizza parlors. This one across from the Harlem State Office building is where an undercover agent reportedly made the first in a series of heroin buys in July 1983.
What would you say would be the size of the Sicilian faction of the Bonanno family?
Well, it keeps getting bigger than we thought. When the Pizza Connection case came down, we arrested about 21, 22 people that you could identify as either members or associates of the Sicilian faction of the Bonanno crime family. With this group, you're talking about another 6 or 7 added to that, and surely there are more that we are, at least at this point, not able to bring charges against, but we're continuing to investigate them.
Earlier today, 5 of those arrested made bail over the vigorous protests of U.S. attorneys, including the wife and sister of the 2 fugitives.
According to U.S. Attorney Giuliani, while the arrests 2 days ago certainly do not stop all of the heroin trafficking in New York, they have put a dent at least in one ring. And he cites its evidence of the impact, the rising cost of heroin on the street, and the number of addicts increasingly turning to methadone maintenance. From the U.S. Attorney's Office at Drug Enforcement, I'm Pablo Guzman, Channel 5 News.
In Manhattan federal court today, the Pizza Connection drug trial got underway. 22 alleged organized crime figures are on trial for running a billion-dollar international drug ring. Police say they distributed the drugs through pizza parlors in several states. The case broke when a Sicilian mobster started talking to police. Frank Grimes reports.
Judge Pierre Laval opened the proceeding by telling the jury it would be a long trial, probably about 6 months. He reminded the jury to keep their minds open, to put any prejudices they might have aside, and to judge the defendants by the evidence alone. In his opening statement, federal prosecutor Robert Stewart talked about the evidence and what it would prove. He said taped telephone conversations in a coded Sicilian dialect will prove that alleged former Sicilian mob boss Gaetano Badalamenti and alleged Bonanno family crime leader Salvatore Catalano supervised the importation of more than $1.5 billion of heroin and cocaine into the United States. Stewart said the government will show how the millions of dollars made from the drug sales were laundered through Switzerland and brokerage houses here in New York. Then Michael Kennedy, attorney for alleged Sicilian mob boss Gaetano Badalamenti, addressed the jury. His opening remark was a quote from Shakespeare. Mocking prosecutor Stewart's one-hour explanation of the government's case, Kennedy read, "Oh, what tangled webs we weave when first we practice to deceive." He told the jury the government's case would fall from the weight of its own mythology. He said Badalamenti was forced out of Sicily in 1978 because he would not get involved in drug trafficking. He said, yes, Badalamenti did use a coded Sicilian dialect in phone conversations, but only to protect his legitimate business from his enemies, which is common to the basic Sicilian character the government doesn't understand. Salvatore Catalano hid his face as his attorney spoke next and asked the jury, "How do you prove you're not a member of the mafia?" Then court was adjourned until Monday, when 20 other defense attorneys will make their opening remarks to the jury. Outside federal court in Manhattan, I'm Frank Grimes, Channel 5 News.
Government put its star witness on the stand today in the Pizza Connection trial of 22 alleged mafia drug smugglers. Pablo Guzman reports.
Opening testimony began in rather melodramatic fashion with descriptions of the internal workings of organized crime that are familiar to those who have seen certain films or read certain books. Terms like mafia and Cosa Nostra were used, which may be offensive to some, but that was the language employed by the star witness for the prosecution, Tommaso Buscetta. Buscetta said he joined the Porto Nova crime family in Palermo, Sicily shortly after World War II. Following the line of questioning by the assistant U.S. attorney, he described an internal structure of capos and consiglieres usually found in tabloids, along with an initiation ritual that involved burning a saint statue mixed with his blood, symbolic, he said, of what would happen should he ever break the code of silence. Buscetta, shown here after he turned state's evidence, which triggered a wave of violence and hundreds of arrests in Italy and the U.S., is believed to have violated that code after 40 years because of increasing dissatisfaction with a younger generation of mobster. He supposedly feels they lack the old-style sense of honor. Buscetta has lost relatives killed by warring factions. When asked today how he was recruited into Cosa Nostra, Buscetta sparked laughter in court when he answered, "Well, I didn't make out an application." It was also revealed that his ties to U.S. crime families dates back to 1963, when he lived under a false identity in Bensonhurst. Buscetta's testimony today focused on an inside look at crime families in Sicily. Tomorrow, though, Tommaso Buscetta is supposed to examine the internal workings of organized crime in the United States. From the courts in Lower Manhattan, I'm Pablo Guzman, Channel 5 News.
And here in New York, the police found one of the men who'd been missing from that mob trial, the one involving what they call the Pizza Connection. They found him on the street in the Williamsburg section of Brooklyn, dead. Everybody had thought he jumped bail, but it looks like a hit instead of a skip. Bob O'Brien reports.
At 10:20 this morning, a vendor at the corner of Gardner and Metropolitan Avenues in Williamsburg called 911 to report that passers-by had just spotted the body of a man partially stuffed into a plastic garbage bag. Detectives say Gaetano Mazzara had been killed a few hours before his body was dumped on the pavement. Mazzara's wallet and more than $700 in cash were found in his pockets. Mazzara was one of 20 defendants in a year-long federal trial in which he and several reputed mob figures are accused of using pizza parlors from the Midwest through the northeastern states as fronts to market more than $3.5 billion worth of heroin over a 10-year period. Mazzara was co-owner of a pizzeria in Union, New Jersey. 90th Precinct detectives say so far they have no solid leads in the rub-out.
We have no witnesses to the body being placed there at this time.
But this is a public area where people pass by.
Yes, and their detectives are canvassing the area and will continue to do so.
And so obviously the 911 call couldn't have come too long after the body was dumped.
Possibly not, right.
And right now, how does it appear to you he was killed?
Well, there are blows to the head, 3 lacerations of the head.
Lieutenant Ceccarini said Mazzara's family filed a missing persons report with police in New Jersey Thanksgiving evening when Mazzara failed to return to his home in Sayreville after making a trip to New York City Wednesday night. This woman was one of the last persons to see Mazzara alive last Wednesday. Harriet Rosen, one of 2 attorneys defending Mazzara, had spent 6 hours with her client Wednesday visiting several places and people in the Edison, New Jersey area. Rosen and Mazzara were preparing their defense for the trial. Rosen said Mazzara was extremely positive, in no way in fear for his life, and looking forward to Thanksgiving dinner with his wife and 3 children. His married daughter, Antoinette, was eating lunch with Ms. Rosen in the courthouse today when Rosen was told of the murder. She then took Mazzara's daughter aside, broke the news to her, and arranged for family friends to escort the sobbing daughter out of the courthouse. Rosen then went into court and said, "We've learned some overwhelmingly sad news. My client is reported to have been found dead." That threw the trial into a state of confusion, with defense attorneys for the remaining 19 defendants arguing over whether or not the 19 jurors and alternates who have been sitting in this case for more than a year should be totally sequestered. Judge Pierre Laval instead brought the jurors into the courtroom briefly, telling them Mazzara had died, but not mentioning how he met his end. The judge instructed the jury to stay away from all media and stay home for the next few days when not in court. Federal marshals will escort each juror to and from his home for all court sessions. Mazzara's other attorney, Marvin Siegel, says that once Mazzara left Ms. Rosen Wednesday evening, he went to a friend's bakery in New Jersey, got a phone call, and then left saying he was going to 44th Street in New York City to meet someone. He was never heard from again. The man holding the umbrella, Salvatore Mazurko, is due to take the witness stand again tomorrow morning. Mazurko is named in the indictment as one of 10 bosses of the alleged drug smuggling operation. His attorney, Joseph Benfanti, joined all other defense lawyers at the trial today in demanding a mistrial be declared. Judge Laval denied the mistrial motion, saying the trial will continue tomorrow. Bob O'Brien, Channel 5 News.